Buffalo Calf Road's legacy as a warrior and defender of her people is as profound as it is mysterious. Her expertise with firearms, her fearlessness in battle, and her ability to inspire others have made her a figure both legendary and enigmatic in Native American history. However, her true legend began on June 17th, 1876, during the Battle of the Rosebud, a pivotal moment in the fight for Cheyenne survival. The day would etch itself into the annals of history as a day when a woman's bravery would alter the course of battle, inspiring warriors and shaping the future of the Cheyenne Nation. The U.S. Army, under the leadership of General George Crook, was on a march toward the Cheyenne village, intent on forcing the Cheyenne people off their ancestral land once and for all. The Cheyenne, a proud and resilient people, had long resisted the encroachment of settlers and the U.S. military. The Army's goal was to neutralize the Cheyenne threat and assert control over the land. But the Cheyenne knew what was at stake. They faced not only the loss of their land, but the annihilation of their culture, their way of life, and their very existence. As the Army advanced, tension hung thick in the air, and both sides braced for what was to come. Buffalo Calf Road, a woman known for her remarkable skills and bravery, was already a respected figure within her tribe. At a time when women's roles were traditionally not focused on combat, she had defied gender norms, proving herself as capable as any man on the battlefield. As the battle loomed, there were many who questioned whether it was right for a woman to fight. However, Buffalo Calf Road was undeterred by these objections. She knew that this battle was about more than just survival. It was about protecting her people, their legacy, and their future. On the day of the battle, the Cheyenne warriors, including Buffalo Calf Road, prepared for an inevitable confrontation with General Crook's forces. The fighting that ensued was brutal, and it was clear that the Cheyenne were not going to yield easily. For hours, the two sides clashed with intense ferocity. The Cheyenne were skilled fighters, well-versed in the art of war, but they were vastly outnumbered by the U.S. military's superior weaponry and tactics. Still, their determination was unmatched, and their commitment to defending their homeland kept them resolute in the face of adversity. Buffalo Calf Road's actions on that day would forever change the course of the battle. Her courage and unwavering spirit in the face of overwhelming odds inspired not only the warriors around her, but also generations to come. Her role in the Battle of the Rosebud is one of the defining moments in the history of the Cheyenne people and in the broader context of Native American resistance to U.S. military expansion. As the Battle of the Rosebud unfolded on June 17, 1876, the Cheyenne people found themselves in a fight for their very survival. The U.S. Army, under the command of General George Crook, was advancing toward their encampment, intent on quelling any resistance from the Native American tribes of the Great Plains. The battle was part of a broader campaign to suppress the Native American nations, force them onto reservations, and ultimately seize their lands for the encroaching settlers. The Cheyenne, along with the Lakota and Arapaho, had no choice but to resist. This was not merely a battle for land. It was a battle for their culture, their freedom, and their future. Among the warriors who rode into battle that day was Buffalo Calf Road, a woman whose bravery and tactical prowess were unmatched. While her fellow warriors might have initially questioned the role of a woman on the battlefield, Buffalo Calf Road had long proven herself to be as capable as any man. Her knowledge of warfare, her skill with a rifle, and her leadership on the front lines made her an invaluable asset to the Cheyenne. But on this fateful day, it would be her extraordinary act of courage that would elevate her to the status of legend. The battle was fierce and chaotic, with gunfire echoing across the hills, and the scent of smoke and blood filling the air. The Cheyenne warriors, riding with unparalleled speed and agility, clashed with Crook soldiers, determined to hold their ground. But it was clear that the U.S. Army had the advantage in terms of weaponry, and the Cheyenne were struggling to keep the soldiers at bay. The tide of battle was turning in favor of the U.S. forces, and the situation was becoming increasingly dire. In the midst of the chaos, Buffalo Calf Road noticed her brother comes inside in a perilous situation. He was trapped in a ravine, surrounded by enemy soldiers who were closing in from all sides. He had fought valiantly alongside the Cheyenne, but was now vulnerable, unable to escape the trap that had been set. For many, it would have been an impossible situation, but for Buffalo Calf Road, it was a call to action. Without a moment's hesitation, Buffalo Calf Road mounted her horse and charged into the fray. Her heart pounded in her chest as she rode straight toward the ravine, her steely determination propelling her forward. As bullets whizzed past her, her focus never wavered. She could hear the cries of her people and the sound of hooves pounding the earth as she raced to reach her brother. She was fully aware of the danger she was in, but there was no turning back. Her brother's life depended on her, and she would not allow him to die alone. When she reached the ravine, she found Comes inside in a desperate state. He was struggling to defend himself against the advancing soldiers, but the odds were overwhelming. Buffalo Calf Road acted swiftly, grabbing her brother by the arm and pulling him onto her horse. Without a moment to spare, she urged the horse forward, guiding it away from the soldiers and sprinting through the battlefield. The soldiers fired their weapons, but her horse was fast, and she rode with a determination that made her nearly untouchable. Her daring rescue would prove to be a turning point in the battle. Not only did she save her brother, but her actions inspired the other warriors to rally. They witnessed her bravery and followed her lead, charging forward with renewed vigor. Buffalo Calf Road's swift and fearless actions on the battlefield turned the tide of the battle and ensured that the Cheyenne would not be easily defeated. The story of Buffalo Calf Road's courage would spread throughout the tribe and beyond, becoming a symbol of the strength and resilience of the Cheyenne people. Her act of heroism was so significant that it earned her the title, "The Girl Who Saved Her Brother," a title that would be passed down in legend and remembered by future generations. Her name would forever be associated with the Battle of the Rosebud, and the bravery she demonstrated that day would echo through history as one of the most remarkable moments in the fight for Native American survival. Buffalo Calf Road's actions at the Battle of the Rosebud exemplified the warrior spirit of the Cheyenne. Her courage in the face of overwhelming odds, her willingness to risk her life for the survival of her people, and her unwavering determination to protect her loved ones made her a hero in the truest sense of the word. As the Cheyenne continued to fight against the U.S. Army in the years that followed, the legacy of Buffalo Calf Road would inspire warriors and non-combatants alike. She became a symbol of hope, strength, and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, acts of courage can ignite the flame of resistance and inspire a nation to stand tall in the face of adversity. Just 1 week after the Battle of the Rosebud, Buffalo Calf Road found herself once again in the midst of battle, this time in what would become one of the most famous confrontations in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Known to many as Custer's Last Stand, the battle was a defining moment in the struggle between the U.S. Army and the Native American nations of the Great Plains. The Cheyenne, Lakota, and Arapaho had united against the forces of General George Armstrong Custer, who had underestimated the strength and resolve of the native nation. The battle took place on June 25, 1876, and was a catastrophic defeat for Custer and his soldiers. Despite having superior weaponry and training, Custer's forces were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers, skill, and strategy of the native warriors. The battle would go down in history as one of the most decisive victories for Native American tribes, and Buffalo Calf Road, who had already proven herself as a fierce warrior, was an integral part of this victory. As the U.S. forces under Custer's command advanced toward the native encampment along the Little Bighorn River, the Cheyenne, Lakota, and Arapaho warriors prepared for battle. The mood was tense, and the weight of history hung heavily on the warriors. They knew that this battle would be a turning point, not only for their survival, but also for their cultural identity. The U.S. government had already begun to impose its will on their way of life, and many feared that this would be their last stand. But in Buffalo Calf Road's eyes, there was no turning back. This was a fight for freedom, and she would fight with every ounce of her strength. As the battle began, the warriors rode with unmatched speed and agility, attacking from all sides, catching Custer's soldiers off guard. The sound of gunfire rang out across the valley, and the air was thick with smoke. The warriors fought fiercely, determined to protect their families and their way of life. Buffalo Calf Road rode into the heart of the conflict, her heart pounding with adrenaline. She was a seasoned warrior, and she knew that her skills would be tested like never before. Throughout the battle, Buffalo Calf Road's bravery never faltered. She fought with the same fierce determination that had marked her actions in the Battle of the Rosebud. As the battle raged on, she found herself on the front lines, charging alongside the Cheyenne warriors, striking down soldiers with precision and fearlessness. The U.S. Army's tactics were no match for the Cheyenne's mobility and knowledge of the land. Buffalo Calf Road, like many of the other warriors, used her intimate knowledge of the terrain to her advantage, maneuvering with stealth and swiftness. At one point, during the height of the battle, Buffalo Calf Road noticed a young warrior who had been separated from the rest of the group. He had lost his horse and was now vulnerable to Custer's forces. Without hesitation, she rode to his aid, picking him up and allowing him to ride behind her. She knew that the survival of each warrior was vital to the overall success of the battle. With her assistance, the young warrior regained his confidence and continued to fight valiantly, joining the ranks of the other warriors who were now overwhelming the soldiers. Buffalo Calf Road's contributions during the Battle of Little Bighorn were instrumental in the defeat of Custer's forces. Her bravery, leadership, and commitment to the survival of her people helped turn the tide of the battle. As the smoke cleared and the sounds of battle died down, it became clear that the native warriors had won a decisive victory. General Custer and his entire regiment had been wiped out, and the U.S. Army's hopes of crushing the native resistance had been dashed. In the aftermath of the battle, the Cheyenne, Lakota, and Arapaho warriors celebrated their victory, but they also knew that the fight was far from over. While they had achieved a significant victory, they were still faced with the unrelenting pressure of the U.S. government's expansionist policies. However, Buffalo Calf Road's heroism in the Battle of Little Bighorn served as a symbol of the strength and resilience of the Native American people. Her actions, alongside the bravery of her fellow warriors, sent a powerful message to the U.S. government and to the world. The native nations would not go down without a fight. Buffalo Calf Road's continued heroism and her contributions to the victory at Little Bighorn cemented her place in history as one of the most remarkable warriors of the Cheyenne people. Her name would be forever remembered in the annals of Native American resistance, a testament to the courage and resilience of those who fought to preserve their way of life against overwhelming odds. After the Battle of Little Bighorn, Buffalo Calf Road's role as both a warrior and leader continued to resonate deeply among the Cheyenne and the broader Native American resistance. Though the battle had been a stunning victory, it did not mark the end of the struggle for freedom. The U.S. government's military forces would soon regroup, and the relentless pressure on the native nations would only intensify. The hope for lasting peace through armed resistance seemed more distant than ever, but Buffalo Calf Road's actions and legacy were far from fleeting. Following Little Bighorn, Buffalo Calf Road became a beacon of hope and strength for the Cheyenne, not just as a warrior, but as a symbol of courage and determination in the face of adversity. Her actions in the battle had already made her a legend, but it was her subsequent leadership and influence that truly set her apart. She helped guide the Cheyenne through the difficult period that followed the battle. Despite the overwhelming odds, she never lost faith in the power of the people to resist. Her resilience was contagious, and she continued to lead by example. As the Cheyenne faced increasing pressure from U.S. forces and the loss of their traditional hunting grounds due to the establishment of reservations, Buffalo Calf Road remained steadfast in her commitment to her people. She knew that the survival of her people was tied not only to physical resistance, but also to the preservation of their culture, traditions, and identity. In this period of immense hardship, Buffalo Calf Road worked tirelessly to ensure that the values of the Cheyenne people were passed down to the next generation. She understood that the future of the Cheyenne Nation depended not just on warfare, but on the resilience of their cultural fabric. Her influence extended beyond the battlefield. While Buffalo Calf Road was a fierce and skilled warrior, she also played a crucial role in maintaining the unity of the Cheyenne people. As the Cheyenne were pushed into more confined spaces, their ability to resist the encroachment of settlers and the U.S. government grew increasingly limited. Buffalo Calf Road knew that the preservation of the spirit of the Cheyenne people required more than just physical strength. It required the unbreakable bond of the community. She often served as a mediator during times of internal conflict and worked to keep morale high in the face of despair. Her leadership, however, was not without its challenges. After Little Bighorn, the U.S. military launched a series of punitive expeditions against the Cheyenne and their allies. The Cheyenne people faced harsh conditions, forced displacement, and broken treaties. Despite these overwhelming challenges, Buffalo Calf Road's leadership continued to inspire her people to stand strong and never yield to the pressures that threatened to erase their way of life. One of the most notable aspects of her legacy was her determination to keep fighting for the Cheyenne's right to live freely, even as the balance of power continued to shift in favor of the U.S. government. She refused to allow the defeat of Custer's forces at Little Bighorn to be seen as the final triumph of the Cheyenne. She understood the importance of sustaining the fight for the freedom of her people, even if that meant adapting to new methods of resistance, including diplomacy, negotiation, and advocacy for their rights in the face of a rapidly changing world. Buffalo Calf Road's influence continued to live on long after her death. As the years passed, and the Cheyenne people were forced onto reservations, her name was invoked by those who sought to inspire resistance against the oppressive forces they now faced. Her spirit lived on in the hearts of the Cheyenne, and her actions were forever enshrined in the lore of their people. She was not only a warrior, but a symbol of resilience, a woman who fought for the preservation of her people's freedom and cultural identity in a world that sought to destroy them. Her legacy as a fierce and compassionate leader, a protector of her people, and a steadfast warrior who refused to give up despite the odds, transcended generations. Buffalo Calf Road became a symbol of the Cheyenne people's enduring struggle against colonialism, a reminder that their fight was not just for land, but for their very right to exist as a people with their own traditions, language, and way of life. Her legacy was not confined to the pages of history, but lived on in the hearts of those who carried her memory forward, reminding future generations of the price of freedom and the strength of the human spirit. The life and legacy of Buffalo Calf Road have continued to resonate through the years, inspiring generations of Native Americans and others who recognize the strength, courage, and unwavering determination she embodied. Her story is not just a chapter in Cheyenne history, but an enduring symbol of resistance, empowerment, and the will to survive. In the years following the forced relocation of the Cheyenne people to reservations and the establishment of the reservation system, the history of Buffalo Calf Road's heroism became an integral part of the broader Native American narrative. In a time when many Native Americans were forced to abandon their traditional way of life, Buffalo Calf Road's legacy served as a powerful reminder of the importance of resisting cultural erasure and preserving one's identity. The Cheyenne, like many other Native nations, faced immense pressure to conform to the demands of the U.S. government, which sought to assimilate them into Western culture, erase their traditions, and diminish their sense of self. In such a time, Buffalo Calf Road's defiant spirit remained a guiding light for many. Her influence was not just felt in the realm of physical combat, but also in the realm of cultural resilience. Buffalo Calf Road had been a warrior, yes, but she had also been a keeper of the Cheyenne people's cultural tradition. Through her efforts, she helped ensure that the stories, rituals, and values of the Cheyenne would continue to be passed down, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Her leadership in keeping the Cheyenne's cultural identity alive during the harshest of times was just as impactful as her feats on the battlefield. As the 20th century progressed, Buffalo Calf Road's legacy continued to inspire Native American activists and leaders who sought to advocate for the rights and sovereignty of Native nations. In the 1960s and 1970s, as the civil rights movement gained momentum in the United States, Native Americans began to assert their rights more vocally and visibly, demanding recognition of their inherent sovereignty and a return to their ancestral lands. Buffalo Calf Road's legacy became a beacon for those in the Native American rights movement who looked to the past for inspiration in their ongoing fight for justice and recognition. Her story was a source of pride for the Cheyenne and other tribes who viewed her as a symbol of empowerment and courage. One of the most significant aspects of Buffalo Calf Road's legacy is the reminder it offers of the power of women in Native American society. While much of Native American history has been dominated by the stories of male warriors and chiefs, Buffalo Calf Road stands as a testament to the important role women played in the struggles for survival and resistance. Her courage on the battlefield was exceptional, but it was her ability to lead, to fight for the survival of her people, and to never give up that cemented her place in history. Buffalo Calf Road's story, passed down through generations, continues to inspire not only Native Americans, but people of all backgrounds who recognize the strength that resides in fighting for one's people, culture, and freedom. Her heroism in battle and her unwavering commitment to her people's survival are emblematic of the resilience of all indigenous peoples in the face of systemic oppression and violence. The legacy of Buffalo Calf Road is one that will never be forgotten. In the modern era, Native American communities continue to honor her and the contributions of countless other women and men who fought to protect their nations from colonial forces. Her story is woven into the fabric of the Cheyenne people and has been passed down through song, story, and ceremony. Buffalo Calf Road remains an enduring symbol of resistance, a hero whose bravery and strength continue to inspire all who seek justice and freedom. After the brutal campaigns and battles, including the infamous Battle of the Little Bighorn, Buffalo Calf Road and her people faced even more dire circumstances. The resilience they displayed in these battles was soon tested as they were forced into one of the most trying periods of their history: the relocation to reservations. Following the defeat of General Custer and the victory of the Cheyenne and their allies, the U.S. government, bent on exerting control over Native American populations, intensified efforts to remove the Cheyenne from their ancestral lands. This period of forced relocation marked a sharp contrast to the sovereignty the Cheyenne had fought so valiantly to protect. Buffalo Calf Road, who had been a key figure in the Cheyenne resistance, now found herself in an environment where the very survival of her people was threatened, not by soldiers alone, but by disease, harsh weather, and broken promises. In 1878, after the military campaigns and battles, including those in which Buffalo Calf Road had demonstrated unparalleled courage. The Cheyenne were forced to surrender and were then relocated to a reservation that was far from their homeland. This journey, which was intended to be a place of peace and settlement, was nothing more than a prison for the Cheyenne. In the harsh, unfamiliar lands of the reservation, the people were subjected to a completely different form of warfare, one of starvation, disease, and forced assimilation. For Buffalo Calf Road, the move to the reservation was not merely a geographic relocation. It was a symbolic loss. The land that had once been rich with the buffalo herds, the center of their spiritual practices, and the foundation of their entire culture, was replaced by a barren wasteland, where they were expected to live according to the rules set by the very people they had been fighting. While the Cheyenne had long relied on their skills as hunters and warriors, the reservation was far removed from these practices. The government saw the Cheyenne as a people who needed to be civilized by forcing them to abandon their traditions. The injustice of it all was overwhelming, and Buffalo Calf Road, despite her previous feats of heroism, could do little to change the course of events. In the early years of their forced relocation, Buffalo Calf Road, along with other leaders, did everything in her power to keep the spirit of the Cheyenne alive. She took care of her people, offering guidance and support. However, the tragic realities of life on the reservation began to take their toll. The Cheyenne were subject to poorly managed government rations, and the promise of fertile land never materialized. This harsh existence only served to reinforce the sense of betrayal that permeated the Cheyenne's collective psyche. The survival of the Cheyenne people, once secure through their warrior traditions and communal strength, now depended on the whims of a government that sought to erase their culture. Buffalo Calf Road's own health began to deteriorate in these years. The harsh conditions, combined with the mental and emotional toll of seeing her people suffer, would weaken even the most steadfast warrior. Yet, she continued to serve as an emotional and spiritual anchor for the Cheyenne. She became more than a figure of the past, more than a warrior who had stood alongside the great leaders of the time. She was a reminder of the power of community and resilience. Her strength continued to inspire the younger generations, even as the older generations began to lose hope. The situation became even more dire when, in the bitter winter of 1879, Buffalo Calf Road faced the compounded suffering of being a mother in these harsh conditions. With limited supplies, her people were unable to keep warm during the freezing temperatures. The unforgiving weather conditions proved disastrous, and the Cheyenne were once again thrown into a state of despair. Buffalo Calf Road, even while pregnant, demonstrated the strength of a leader as she stayed by the side of her people, attempting to guide them through yet another season of hardship. Tragically, the first night of their flight from the Army's relentless pursuit claimed the lives of 11 infants, their bodies succumbing to the cold. Her unwavering resolve to resist and protect her people in this environment came at great personal cost. Even as many Cheyenne began to surrender, crushed under the weight of starvation and disease, Buffalo Calf Road and her small band of followers did not. Her leadership was fueled by love for her people and an undying commitment to their survival. She fought to protect their identity and culture, even in the direst circumstances. This time was defined by the relentless pursuit from the U.S. Army, who had become increasingly brutal in their tactics. The Cheyenne were forced to flee into the harshness of nature, a far cry from the warriors who had once fought on horseback, striking down their enemies in battle. Now, they were forced into a desperate struggle for survival. Yet, even amid this hardship, Buffalo Calf Road continued to lead, refusing to surrender. She was a symbol of defiance, an unwavering force against the erosion of her people's sovereignty. Her endurance in the face of these challenges, despite overwhelming odds, was a testament to her strength. It was a strength that transcended physical combat and spoke to the deeper values of leadership, family, and perseverance. Buffalo Calf Road's story was becoming more than just one of battles and warfare. It was evolving into a story of survival against the very systems of colonization and destruction that had sought to erase her people. Her legacy would not be defined by the battlefields alone, but by her refusal to succumb to the destruction of the Cheyenne people, their land, and their culture. In the final chapter of Buffalo Calf Road's life, she faced an unthinkable series of tragedies. Yet her resilience and determination never faltered. Despite the heart-wrenching suffering that marked the Cheyenne people's forced relocation, she continued to resist, always striving to preserve her people's way of life. The trauma and loss she experienced during her life were immense. Yet her legacy would continue to serve as a guiding light for future generations of Native Americans. When the Cheyenne people were finally forced onto reservations, the brutal conditions had already taken their toll. Yet Buffalo Calf Road's determination to return to her homeland only grew stronger. In 1879, she, along with other Cheyenne families, began a perilous journey to escape the confines of the reservation and return to their rightful land. It was a daring escape, a desperate attempt to reclaim what had been taken from them. As they journeyed through the freezing wilderness, they faced constant danger, with the U.S. Army in relentless pursuit. Despite numerous hardships, including starvation, exposure to the elements, and the constant threat of capture, Buffalo Calf Road's group managed to evade the military, staying one step ahead of their pursuers. However, not all of the Cheyenne groups were as fortunate. One faction, led by Dull Knife, sought refuge with the Lakota, but was tragically captured. A futile attempt to escape resulted in the massacre of more than 65 Cheyenne at Fort Robinson. This massacre would haunt Buffalo Calf Road and the Cheyenne for years to come. It marked the painful realization that no matter how much they fought, no matter how much they resisted, they were at the mercy of the U.S. government, whose policies of forced relocation and extermination had left them powerless to protect their families. Buffalo Calf Road, along with a group of 300 Cheyenne, managed to find temporary refuge in the sandhills of Nebraska. But even here, there was no peace. Her husband, already weakened by the hardships they had endured, descended into madness. Their family life, already broken by the atrocities they had witnessed, crumbled further. In a fit of rage, he killed Black Crane, another Cheyenne member, resulting in his banishment from the group. Buffalo Calf Road, her children, and a few remaining relatives followed him in his exile. By this point, Buffalo Calf Road had seen too much suffering to maintain hope that the Cheyenne would ever again live as they once had. Their journey back to the homeland was not one of triumph, but of unrelenting tragedy and loss. Yet, even as the U.S. Army closed in on them, Buffalo Calf Road continued to lead with courage and strength. She never stopped fighting for the survival of her people, even though she knew that their way of life had already been irreversibly altered. Her death in 1879, due to diphtheria, while imprisoned, was a painful, premature end to a life that had been filled with sacrifice and struggle. Buffalo Calf Road had lived and fought for her people until the very end. Although she did not live to see her people finally gain a degree of peace at the Lame Deer Reservation in Montana, her legacy remained strong. In the final years of her life, she had borne witness to the destruction of her people, yet she had also symbolized their resilience in the face of immense odds. The legacy of Buffalo Calf Road would forever be a testament to the strength, courage, and enduring resistance of the Cheyenne people.